Let's see if there's audio. All right. So I woke up this morning thinking about board ID resistors, and then here it is 10:30 at night. I'm about to leave the lab, and I'm still thinking about board ID resistors because a case came up about board ID resistors, so I just thought that it would be fun to share. So I woke up this morning and I saw a post from Justin Ashford from the Art of Repair channel. Justin is living in China, so he has a lot of sort of first-hand cool information right there with boots on the ground in China, so it's always fun to check in with him. And this is the thing that he posted, which was a comparison of the logic board from the new iPhone 11 Pro and the iPhone 11 Pro Max. And it looks like they're totally the same logic board except for one tiny little spot, and that's there in red, a resistor. Now presumably that is going to be a board ID resistor. And according to legend, and I don't know if this is true or not, we'll have to stay tuned to find out. I won't be doing this experiment for a long time, but hopefully folks in China will let us know if this is true or not. That in theory, you can take the board ID resistor and change it to turn an iPhone 11 Pro into an iPhone 11 Pro Max logic board. Then if you took that logic board and you put it into Pro Max housing, it would turn on and work. So maybe that's true, maybe that's not. But it has a really reasonable chance of being true from what we know about board ID resistors. Now, how did that come up for me today? I want to tell you about the case of this iPhone 5 that ended up being a board ID resistor problem to help us kind of get an understanding for what these things do as we figure out whether or not this is a true thing about the iPhone 11 Pro or not. All right, so finally, Anne's iPhone 5. Look at this, Anne. Your iPhone 5 is turned on and it works, finally solved. Anne sent this old iPhone 5 in April 26th, it says on the note. And Anne's note says that her iPhone 5, oh, this is fun. Look at this, referral source. Anne found out about us from an Apple News app. Fun! Alright, so Anne sent it in, says the phone was water damaged, and she said it worked for a while after it got water damaged before dying, but she was never able to back it up before it finally went dead, and she'd really love to get the photos off of it. And I have just taken the photos off, full backup, and all of the data on this. So I want to show you why this phone's been here since April and why it was really tough for us to figure this one out. So it began in our hands as a fairly classic water damage main short for iPhone 5. This board doesn't have a ton of water on it, so let's take a look under the microscope and see if you can see what's going on with it. How do I get to microscope? You can really tell when it gets like super late in the day that I can't navigate my own little tab anymore. All right, here we are. Let's take a look. This is iPhone 5. Not a lot of water down here. Pretty much none. So that looks really in good shape. And as we move up the logic board, you can see that there is a tiny bit of corrosion in some spots around here. You can still see this little bit of, white there. I was definitely worried about TriStar, but that ended up not being a big deal. I think maybe this was where the main short was. I'm not really sure, but there's definitely a little bit of corrosion around this guy and around here, a little bit of corrosion. I investigated these guys. I really don't remember what component it was that caused the main short that we solved. On the other side, not a lot, not a ton of water damage. And I really didn't know what was up with this. So what happened was, according to my note, which I'd even forgotten, my note says that this one had a main short, and then this is what happened. It booted to the Apple logo, showed that Apple logo, and then it faded out, and it became a 30 milliamp phone on DC power supply. What the heck is that? 30 milliamps means it's sort of below the level of the CPU turning on and actually booting. So what kind of stuff causes 30 milliamp, like dead CPU? That doesn't really make sense. Dead CPU, no power to the CPU, no held in reset, or having a crystal problem, like really brainstem kind of problems. But I didn't know how that could possibly happen with the damage that was on this board that I could see. And guess what it was, guys? I bet you can guess. I bet that you can check your chords. Is the audio weird? Great. Oh, great. It's another one where the voice is deep. Fantastic. My favorite. I don't think there's anything I can do about it. Do I sound like this? No. I didn't check my audio before I hit stream because it's 10:30 at night, and I just thought this would be really fun. D boys, your voice is deeper than Jenna Jameson. Maybe I can talk like this and it'll be fine. I can't. There's nothing I can do about that. If I unplug the microphone and plug it back in, well, maybe I can do that. Let's see. All right, microphone is back on. Let's see if it looks like there's any audio. Okay, it sees audio. That's the, take it or leave it. That's the best that I can do. So let's talk about what's wrong with this board. I didn't see this until today. So it's funny that I woke up thinking about board ID resistors from that iPhone 11 Pro turning into the iPhone 11 Pro Max. That has a good chance of actually being true. Chris Long pointed out that it may not activate because maybe it's missing some information that should be in the NAND, but who knows, maybe it will. Remember the old iPad 2, 3, 4s that had the iCloud locked cellular models? You could change board ID resistors on those, and that would make them just auto boot to DFU and kind of not know who they were. If you plugged them into iTunes, they would be detected in DFU. And then if you had changed the board ID resistor so that it was in a Wi-Fi position, then it would ask iTunes for Wi-Fi software, and then it would download, wake up and believe that it was a brand new Wi-Fi iPad, even though it had the cellular hardware. It would forget about all that by changing the board ID resistor. So let me show you with a picture that I took, because I thought this is probably what this is going to be. So I took a before picture of this one, and this is it. Look at that. So this spot right by the CPU, can you see my cursor? I don't know if you can see my cursor or not. So in this picture, this is the CPU, and around a CPU, there's a lot of resistors that are always embedded in underfill. So look at that. I don't know how to point to it. Can you see my mouse? Sounds better. Hey, fantastic. Excellent. I'll have to remember the pro tip. Have you tried turning it off and on for the win on the microphone? So the board ID resistor, it is, do you see it? Right next to that big cap is a resistor. And to me, it looks normal as I'm looking over the board for a problem. That's why I didn't see it since April. This board was a main short with an Apple logo that faded out, and then it was a 30 milliamp CPU brain dead board on DC power supply. What the heck? I didn't see anything else wrong with it. What the heck? And that's why it sat here for long enough. And then today I busted it back out almost randomly, thinking about board ID resistors, and then I kind of went around and I looked, and that's when I noticed this resistor. So let's see what happens when we look it up. This is R12.
Now, how would R12 actually fail? There's only one way for a resistor to practically fail in an iPhone, and that is to get water damage and lift up off of its pads. Sometimes it might crack in half. But this one just looks like it's covered in underfill. Things that are covered in underfill, they're waterproof. So let's look at the schematic so that you guys can see what is the deal with R12. And this is where we're going to learn about board ID resistors. So here we are, iPhone 5 schematic, blast from the past. And we're on this weird page, and here we can find R12. So this is the resistor that kind of looks, I don't know, possibly, maybe, sort of, kind of corroded on one end. What do you guys think? And let's read. I love using the schematic instead of just, ZXW and how things connect together, because it has this rich detail, these little clues and hints. For example, it tells us that R12 is a common pull-up resistor for the function of board revision, board ID, and boot config pins within the CPU. So that means the CPU is tied to this line that R12 is on, and R12 is the pull-up resistor. So if you delete a pull-up resistor, you have taken a data line and cut it so that now it loses the ability to transition from a 1 to a 0, 0 to 1, and actually encode information. So it's just like turns it into static. So what do you think would happen to an iPhone 5 if you took a CPU pin for boot config and turned it into static? That's a good chance that it could turn into a 30 milliamp phone, a brain dead phone. So I was excited when I looked up R12 and saw this. So it's also interesting, while we're on the same page, that we can kind of see boot config and see all of this extra data that kind of gives us a little bit of a clue on how these things, the iPhone 5 was early on. There was a lot more information in the schematic. And it kind of tells us what these board revision, board ID, some choices that are there. So that's just fun to read. R12, if that was missing, it was actually corroded off the board, could that make a brain dead phone? Yeah, loss of the board ID resistor, that could do it. So after this, I decided to take it off, and I'll show you what that looked like. So let me get rid of schematics. Goodbye, schematic. And after I took a little bit of gentle 200-degree hot air and kind of picked the underfill around, this is what I saw. Boom. R12 fell off when I probed around there. And look at the pad. The pad for the 1V8 top line is completely corroded. Look at that pad. See it? Can you see it? Can you see my cursor? Let's see if chat answers whether or not you can see my... in a bar watching board repair. I'm guessing the slightly looking, oh, you guys can't see my mouse. Boo! All right, next to the giant cap, see the giant, this way. See in the corner of the CPU, see the giant cap. It's the component that is adjacent to that. It is now missing, and you can see up by the top CPU, you can see the little pad. And the second pad that the resistor was sitting on, it's totally gray and oxidized. Let me show you what it looks like on the live board right now. So let me turn that off as well. And let's go back and look under the microscope. Where is it? There we go. So we can see what it looks like. I'll show you right there. See it? Look at that. So this guy, and look at how just gross he looks right now, because it's hard to go dig up a 1 kilo ohm resistor or whatever he is. So this guy, I'll show you. I'll take him back off. This guy caused all the trouble. That little ugly piece of crap. If you take him off, this iPhone 5 doesn't know who he is. This is the board ID resistor. And if you remove the board ID resistor and the thing has an open line on this board ID, then the CPU is brain dead. In this case, you're missing the boot config pin information, and the CPU goes, whoa, I don't know what to do. I cannot even initiate, can't do anything. I don't even know how to begin. So that's the consequence of this little board ID resistor. And it was sitting on, at the time, this pad right here was just, looked like I don't know, I don't even know what. It looked like a pothole in the road. It was totally black and completely corroded and oxidized. So all I had to do, since April, who knew? All I needed to do all along was dig this guy up, lift him up, touch up his pad, and then stick him back on in his spot. Get on in your spot. And he really needs to be replaced. I actually probably will replace him because I would like for Anne to get to see her phone working again. If Anne's screen and charge port works, then I will replace that guy so that she can get back a working phone. If her screen doesn't work, then Anne's going to have to just settle for data. So there we go. So that's all it took. Restoring that board ID resistor turned this back into a iPhone 5 that can boot up and recover 30 gigs of pictures that were on this sucker. And that's the deal. So will the iPhone 11 Pro be able to turn into an iPhone 11 Pro Max logic board? Maybe. The jury is still out because now, from the days of the iPhone 5 are long gone, and now there's a lot more complexity in the logic boards, and we can't really predict what's going to happen if you change the board ID and make that now mismatched to some information that may be stored, either burned into the CPU heart, you know, like burned fuses in the CPU, or stored, written in the NAND itself. I'm not really sure, so we'll have to actually do that experiment and find out. But it's definitely worth looking into. The only difference that we can detect between the iPhone 11 Pro and the Pro Max is a board ID resistor. And they are super powerful, guys, as we can see here. And that is it for this one. Time to go to bed and stop thinking about board ID resistors.